Hi guys, hope you are doing well. Today I wanted to share with you how I made my junk journal. So this is basically the cover and then putting some of the pages in. So what I'm doing is starting with a chipboard base. I believe I got this chipboard in a pack quite some time ago and I think I may have ordered it from Joann's, but I'm not quite sure. I've had it for quite some time. But what I want to do first is reinforce the spine, and I had this old priority envelope that I got from some mail that I received, and I definitely saved the stuff, and it's Tyvek, and it works really well for reinforcing your spines. It doesn't rip or tear, and it goes on really nice on the album. And what I'm going to do is I'm just trimming it out, and I'm going to use it as the base. So I'm going to put it on the front and the back of the spine, and I'm just going to use some PVA glue to glue this all down. So I've already cut my pieces. I don't know off the top of my head what size they are. I'm using 8.5 by 11 paper in the album, so the base of the board that I cut out are just approximately like a quarter inch or so bigger on all sides to accommodate the pages in the book. So here is just some PVA glue. I got this from Amazon. And I'm going to pour that out into this packaging that I kept. I always keep my packaging from embellishments and things like that have like this well. I use it a lot for putting glue in and paint and things like that. So that's a good tip so you can recycle your packaging. So I'm just going to glue that all down. I'm just using a brush. I like the brush because it gets it all over the cardboard or the chipboard because you don't want any air bubbles. So you want to have a nice thin coat over the entire thing. If you just kind of glue it down and have like lines in it, it doesn't lay very nice. So I'm just using the extra piece of chipboard there to make sure I have enough space. You want to have a little bit of a gap between the spine and the two covers, and I like using the extra piece of chipboard because then I can make sure it's even all around, and that's the perfect amount is the same chipboard. So I've glued that all down. I'm just going to take a card and smooth everything out. Again, you want to make sure you have no air bubbles or anything like that. And then I'm going to start working on the other side. So I'm just going to take some more glue using my paintbrush again, and then make sure you always clean off your paintbrush right after this. And then typically my paintbrushes stay pretty nice if I keep them clean. I know a lot of paintbrushes get kind of funky after you use the glue, but like I said, if you just wash it off as soon as you get done with your project, usually they stay pretty nice. So I'm just smoothing everything off on the other side, and then I'm going to bend and shape the cover to make sure everything lays flat. So you can see here that I'm getting some crinkling and things like that in the envelope. So I'm just going to keep playing with it and gluing and smoothing it down until everything lays very nice on the cover. So you can just see that I'm doing that. I'm going to make sure I have some nice creases here so that it doesn't crack. And again, this is Tyvek, so it shouldn't, but you want to make sure that you have some creases here so that everything lays really nice, and then it opens up and closes very nice too, so it's not too tight. Now I've just picked some paper that I want to use for my cover. This is paper from the paper pad that I've been using, and I kind of went back and forth. I really like this side with the navy and the gold, but I thought it was just going to be too bold. So you're going to see here in a minute, I'll flip it over and I'm going to use this back side. And I think it ends up being just a little bit more subtle, and I like it better on the journal overall. So I just like this part better. I really, like I said, love the gold and the navy, but I thought it was just a little too flashy for the book that I was putting together. So I'm just kind of looking at the paper, looking at some of the embellishments I'm going to be using and making sure, yep, I think that's going to look best with the book. So now I'm just laying it out to make sure everything's going to fit very nice. And what I'll end up doing here is I will be gluing again the front cover to the paper, just again using my PVA glue and a paintbrush. And what I'll do is I will mark around the edge of the book, and then that way I know where my glue needs to go. And I thought painting on the paper would be better than painting on the cover. It just seemed to be a little bit cleaner. So that's what I'm going to do. Just using my Tim Holtz mat here underneath it. It's just like a silicone mat. I really like this for when I do these mixed media projects because it keeps my work surface clean and everything cleans off of it really nice. I need to get something that's a little thicker. I think close to my heart, I think it is, makes a silicone mat like this, but it's thicker and it tends to stick to the surface a little bit better so that it doesn't move around. Sorry about my face in this. So I need to look into some other mats because I like this one because it works really well, but it's a little small, and I think they do make bigger ones, and it does tend to kind of like crinkle up a bit because it is so thin, but it works for me for now. Now I'm just going through, making sure I'm using my card, making sure everything's smoothed down. Again, you don't want any bubbles anywhere. And now I'm just taking my bone folder and then drawing a line kind of around all the edges because I want to fold this up, and that will help fold the edges. You want to trim around the corners here because you want to have a nice clean edge. And what I basically do is I cut almost to the very corner, and I cut kind of at an angle instead of cutting straight across, and it gives you a really nice crease then when you get done with this. So here I'm just using my bone folder, kind of easing it up. I don't want to just roll it over because then you'll have a funky edge. So I'm taking my bone folder and really pressing down the edges to get some really nice creases, and then everything lays down much nicer. So again, just taking my time, making sure everything lays super nice, and making sure that where I trimmed those corners, everything is lining up really nice as well. Once I get all this done, I'm going to take some more of my glue and then start gluing down all the edges here. And you can see that was just a little bit too far away from the corner still, so I'm just going to modify that. And now I'm just going to glue everything down. I think I start showing you a little bit of this, but I don't show you the entire process because it gets a little boring. Basically, I just repeat the same thing I do here on all of the edges. So just making sure I glue everything down really well, making sure the glue is on the edge of the book as well as the front of the book. And that is my last piece there. Just adding a little extra glue where I think it might be needed. And then that's basically the major part of the cover. I will add some fabric on the spine, and I'm going to collage on the inside of the cover. So first I'm going to play with this spine a little bit. This is just some old upholstery fabric that I had, and I'm going to just try to make sure this is going to fit. I left the edges ratty because I like how that looked. I thought that would look nice on the book. But before I do that, I decided I wanted to collage the inside. I thought it'd be easier. It's a little bit flatter at this point to collage than if I had the fabric on the spine. Plus, some of the fabric is going to cover up where I have the paper, and I want to make sure that I have this collage really nice. So I'm just taking some scraps of paper that I've used in this journal, and I'm going to put those down. I have a couple other printables that I printed out, and I'm just going to ink around all the edges and start gluing everything down. For this, I am going to use my PVA glue as well, I believe, if I remember correctly, just to make sure everything lays down really, really nice. Or actually, no, I'm going to use a glue stick. So some of this paper is copy paper, so the really nice thin copy paper I'm just going to use a glue stick on because it lays very nice. And I actually use this on all the paper, but then I find, and I should have known better, that the scrapbooking paper, the thicker paper, doesn't lay down nice. I do use a glue stick at first, but then I follow it up with some extra what is it called, the 3-in-1 glue, just to make sure it stays down and it doesn't go anywhere. So just inking up the edges, gluing everything down, and I do keep this process in. I thought you guys would want to see all of this process. It's just basically me gluing down paper, but I thought you would want to see how I kind of collaged it up. This is paper from, I think it's Love Junk Journals, the Silhouette collection, I think it is, the printables from Etsy. I really like this fern. I like the background of this paper, and I thought it went well with the book that I am making. So I'm just making sure I trim down the edges. I like the kind of torn edge better. I just think everything melts better into the background when you have that torn edge. If you have straight edges, it just doesn't seem to flow as well to me. So that's why I end up tearing a lot of these. Again, just gluing with my glue stick. This is all printed on regular copy paper, so it's thinner and it lays down really nice, and just making sure I use my card to ensure that there's no bubbles. So you can see here I'm just taking out some of the scraps of paper that I've had, making some of the clusters and things like that. These are just leftovers. This is some Tim Holtz paper. Now this is thicker paper. Again, I'm using my glue stick, but later on I will end up reinforcing that a bit more with my 3-in-1 glue. So I pulled out this end paper, and I just like the color of it, so I'm just trimming this down. Again, this is thin paper. It's from that glue book that I actually have on the right. Inking around all the edges, and then I'll glue that down. And you can see the glue on the back of that, but it doesn't matter because it's not going to be seen. Just trying to use up all of my scraps. And one thing I do want to say is where that priority mail Tyvek paper is, that does not really accept the glue very well. So I definitely end up using some of the 3-in-1 glue where the edges of the paper hit that, because it just doesn't stick very well with this glue stick. So you'll see later on, I think I might show some of that where I add some extra adhesive with 3-in-1 in those places. Another piece of Tim Holtz paper, inking up the edges. I'm going to glue that down. Get some more of that Love Junk Journals silhouette paper. And again, just kind of playing with it. A lot of times I will lay down all my collage pieces first before I start gluing, but for whatever reason I decided just to go for it and just start putting everything down. I find that if you put some of the bigger pieces down first and then follow up with some of the smaller pieces or the decorative pieces, it works better. So you can kind of see I put down, some of the more bigger pieces first. Again, just tearing around the edges, more Tim Holtz paper, inking it up. This is just inked up with some Distress Oxide Vintage Photo. And I'll just keep doing this until all of the chipboard cover is covered up. There's some more silhouette paper. I really like that paper a lot. It's already kind of collage looking paper, and then you can just tear it up in pieces and then put it down, and I think it really looks nice on the collage. Looking around, seeing what else I can do. This is paper from the cover. I thought that would be nice to incorporate some of that. Here's some more of the silhouette paper. Here's a nice big piece. Again, like I said, put down your big pieces first. I did that a little bit here, but putting down the big pieces first really helps a lot. And then just decorating around that seems to be the best bet. Otherwise, when you do all the little pieces, it just seems to get a little overwhelming, and then it gets a little choppy looking. I think having the big pieces down first as the base and then adding on the decorative elements as you go, I think it just ends up looking better in the end. Here's some more coffee dyed paper, just some more, it's copy paper. Trying to fill in some spaces. Here, instead of just gluing everything down at first, I'm going to kind of audition some things, making sure I like it. There's that paper from the front cover. Ties everything from the front into the rest of the paper. I need a spot there in the top left, kind of. And that's some more of the end paper from the book. And I'm really liking how this looks, so I'm going to start gluing this down here in a couple minutes. First, of course, I'm going to ink around everything. Tearing a big strip. You can see I've already glued all those pieces down on the right hand side. Didn't make you watch all that. That gets a little boring watching me glue. Here's more silhouette paper, just inking around the edges, and that's going to go down kind of the spine of the book, or the sides of the spine of the book, to cover up more of that envelope. You can see my glue stick is almost empty, so I have just the one piece of it there. It still works, still using it. If it has glue, I'm going to use it. Here I am creasing into, or using that card to put the paper into the crease. Again, I want to make sure that when you open and close the book, it opens and closes nice. So you want to make sure that you get that paper down in that crease. If you put it over the top, especially with the paper, it will tend to crack and rip. So you want to make sure you kind of get it in that area. Some more of that paper from the cover. You'll see me adding some 3-in-1 glue later on to that. And I'm really liking how this turned out. Just cleaning up some of my mess. It's hard to work when you have all this stuff everywhere. And now I'm going to work on the spine. So just kind of playing with the spine, making sure it's going to open and close really nicely. And I am going to use some PVA glue on this. This actually took a bit. I'm going to show you some of what I did, but then I'm also going to do some of this off camera. So I will show you the end result at the end. It got a little cumbersome to try to show on camera, so you'll see that I will come at the end and show you how it all turned out. But I'm still working here, so there's some more video to go before I move on. Here I'm just adding my 3-in-1 glue, making sure all the little corners and edges are all staying down. I wanted to vintage up the edges of this. I thought that would look nice. They looked a little too light, and I really like how this turned out. I think it kind of adds a finishing touch to the edge of the book, and it's subtle. It's not overpowering or anything like that. So I'm just making sure all the edges have this color on it. And this is all good to do before you put that spine on. And I am going to make it a hidden spine, so you won't see actually the stitching on the outside of the spine. So before I forgot about this part, sorry about that. Before I put the fabric on the spine, I am going to sew in my signatures, and this is definitely not a tutorial. I seem to wing this every time, so you're not going to see me doing the full thing on camera, just because I struggle with it. I'm not very good at measuring, or I mean, I'm fine with measuring, but it's not something I probably want to show you guys because it gets a little bit daunting and it's a little hard to show. So you'll see here that I'm just going to cover the spine so that you don't see the Tyvek. And then I will show you some of the process of sewing these in and measuring, but I'm not going to give you a lot of detail just because, like I said, each person's book's going to be a little different, and it is a little difficult to show on the camera, and I kind of winged it. So I kind of, measured a little bit and then measured again and kind of messed with it until it was going to fit my book okay. So like I said, it's not, I didn't really save the measurements or anything like that because each book is unique and it depends on your spine and your signatures and everything else on how this is all going to lay out in the end. Just gluing that down with some 3-in-1 glue. I want to make sure it sticks really well. Again, that Tyvek, like I said, is slick, so you want to make sure you use a nice glue that's going to stay. Here, I'm just pulling out my bookbinding stuff. You can see I made a little template with some paper, measured it out like I was just mentioning, and I'm using my awl to poke holes, and I do have 5 holes. I'm going to do, I think it's called a pamphlet stitch or something like that. I can't quite remember. But anyway, I'm going to pull out my wax thread and some of my supplies to stitch, like my needle and things like that. I can't remember if I've already punched the holes in the signatures or not. I think I have not. So I'm going to show you kind of how I do that. So I just took this template that I made for the book. I'm folding it in half, and then my holes are going to be there in the middle, and I'm going to use that as a guide to poke holes in my signatures. I'm going to take one signature at a time, find the middle of the signature, make sure everything is laying in the book like I want it, and then I'll pop that in the middle, and I will clip everything together, and I'm going to use my mouse pad as a cushion to stick my awl in. You can see here my template's a little bit bigger because my book itself is bigger, and I want to make sure that all the pages are going to fit in nicely. So I just added a line on the top and bottom, so when I put this little template in each of the signatures, I know exactly where it needs to go, so all of the pages line up. So when you open the book, you don't have like one page set up and one page set down and that type of thing. So I'm just kind of keeping everything closed up, kind of using my awl, poking some holes, and then I will poke them a little bit bigger just so it's a little easier to get the thread and needle through. And then that's basically what I do for all of the pages. So now that I have that, I'm going to start sewing it in. I will sew, like I said, one signature at a time. I go in through the very center hole, and I don't know if this is the correct way to do it. Again, this is something else I just kind of winged. I kind of knew what it needed to, or what way the thread needed to go in, but I don't know if this is exactly how you're supposed to do it, like the professional way. I don't know. So I'm just kind of going up and down in the different holes. So I started in the middle, I went to the next hole at the top, came through, went to the next hole towards the bottom. I'm coming out of the very top hole, or bottom hole I should say in this case, and then I am going to go back through the second hole there, and then come through the top, go through the second hole from the top, and then ultimately come through the middle. So you can kind of see what I did there. Again, I'm not exactly sure if that's exactly the way you're supposed to do it, but it ends up working out. I just make sure that I do all of them the same way. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure everything's very tight so that your pages stay in really nicely and you don't want them flopping around on you. And I do cut it and leave a little bit of a tail. And then I will use my bone folder just to fold everything down to make sure everything lays really nice in the book. So that is my first signature in the book. And I will do the same thing for all the rest of the pages. And you can see here that all of them are in. Just kind of doing a really super quick flip through so you can see what that all looks like. Sorry about my phone there. I used a combination of grid paper, coffee dyed paper, some of the scrapbooking paper, coffee filters, time cards, encyclopedia paper, and all that. So there it is, and you can see there's room to grow. And now I'm going to work on the spine. So this is the fabric that I have. Again, this is just some old upholstery fabric from some kitchen chairs that I had, and I'm just kind of measuring it up, seeing how I want to have this, and I will end up adding PVA glue to the back of this, and you can see my stitching there, and I want to cover that up. And this worked out really well. It did take some time, like I had mentioned earlier in the video, because I had to glue it down and then hold it in place because this fabric, because it's upholstery fabric, it is pretty thick. So I had to make sure I had everything staying in place and not coming up. So it took me a couple days to get this spine all done to make sure everything was sticking really nicely. So just putting a generous helping of PVA glue here. This also helps keep the stitching in place. So you can see here I am just putting a bunch of this glue on the back of this spine, and then what I'll do after this is I will kind of fast forward the video and you'll see kind of the end result. I end up putting some lace also on the spine just to kind of cover up some of the back of this fabric. I just thought it gave a nice little finishing touch. And you can see I've already, and well, also the glue comes through, so I wanted to kind of cover that up. So here, I'm just showing you how that looks. And then holding it down in place, and I'm going to show you now the end. So you can see the lace that I added on the end, and then that's the finished book.